We found a way to utilize the fact that women bleed every month to give them valuable insights about their health. No woman today should die of cervical cancer. We know we can prevent it if it's caught early, and we have the tools to do so. Not being active in designing the future one has brought us to a place where we are decades behind when it comes to women's health.
Welcome to the Femtech Health Podcast. Today, we're excited to have Dr. Sara Naseri, the CEO and co-founder of Qvin, with us. We'll be exploring the groundbreaking Q-Pad device, which empowers women by utilizing menstrual blood to provide valuable health insights. You'll learn about the journey behind Qvin, the significance of menstrual health, and how this innovative approach can transform women's healthcare. We'll also discuss the importance of accessibility, affordability, and the potential for early detection of various health conditions. All right, let's get started with today's show.
Hi, I'm here today with Dr. Sara Naseri. She is the CEO and co-founder of Qvin. Qvin is a biotech company with a Q-Pad, empowering women, period. Thanks, Sarah, for being here today. Tell us all about Qvin and just tell us about your journey into this space.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. And so I'll tell you a little bit about Qvin. So as you said, we're a women's health company. And we found a way to utilize the fact that women bleed every month to give them valuable insights about their health. So we've built this new device. We call it the Q-Pad. And essentially, it's a modified menstrual pad that allows women to collect a small volume of blood when they're on their period that can be used for various testing. And so the journey actually started many, many years ago. We've been at it for about 10 years now. It was actually an idea that I had while I was still in medical school. And I had sort of seen in practice and also, of course, learned and knew from theory that just how important time is for any condition, any prognosis, really time is the most important factor, right? And so I was very, it's sort of top of mind for me. Why are we not able to catch things early and be more preventative about our healthcare? And one of the things that, I realized is that it's actually really hard to get information about what's going on in our bodies when we're outside the doctor's office. And, unfortunately, patients rarely go to the doctor unless they have a symptom, it hurts somewhere. And at that point in time, it's already a little too late to be preventative. And so was really sort of thinking through that at the time. And there was already, some companies trying to give us information about what's going on in our bodies outside the doctor's office, but the data wasn't always very clinically relevant. And so starting out, really wanted to find a way that we could, obtain clinically relevant information about what was going on in our bodies regularly, conveniently. And because blood is the most commonly used bodily fluid for really any diagnostics, blood became top of mind. And then the question was, well, how do we get access to blood regularly, conveniently? And then it sort of hit me that, hold on a second, half of the world bleeds every single month. Why has nobody used that? And that question led to this very 10-year long journey, really starting with, first understanding what is the diagnostic utility of menstrual blood. And interesting enough, when we looked online to see what had been published on this topic, really there was nothing out there. So to really understand if there was any utility here, we had to do the foundational research in even, figuring out what is menstrual blood, what are the clinically relevant biomarkers that can be useful for patients. And so early on in Qvin's life, it was very much based on figuring out these basic science questions. And once we understood that there certainly is utility, then the next couple of years became about how do we then capture that opportunity? How can we, build a solution that is accessible, affordable, and makes it possible for women to very easily and conveniently get that information about what's going on in their bodies. And then once that process was done, the next couple of years became going through FDA and, very, I think big moment for the team and I would say women's health as a whole that we were able to obtain FDA clearance last year. So It's been quite the journey. Yeah.
I love it. I know, that whole that's a huge step and a huge progression, to get there. So, tell us about what the word Quinn means too, and, why you came up with that name for this company.
Yeah, absolutely. So the word Qvin comes from a Danish word, kvinde, which means woman. And it's actually because both myself and my co-founder are originally from Denmark. So I was born and raised in Denmark and, moved to the US 11 years ago or something like that. And, we wanted to find a word that, really captured the fact that we're a women's health company. And also because we were both from Denmark, then, it was meaningful that it had some connection to this part of the world where in many ways, we feel like there are a lot of great values when it comes to society and healthcare in particular and how we, take care of our patients and each other. And we wanted to bring that into the company as well for company culture, but also just generally how we built the company.
Mhm.
That's how the word came out up with Quinn as a name. Yeah.
So I like what you said too, like accessible, affordable, a way to actually look at some of these clinical biomarkers without people actually walking into a physician's office. Because I agree with you 100%. I talk to women all the time in my pelvic health practices, and they oftentimes say, "Oh, this has been going on for years, but I just didn't think about it, or I didn't have time, or I didn't, and I think that's what struck me about, when you look at the, like you call it utility, but the clinical relevance of, utilizing something that's happening once a month that you actually can get a biomarker out of. I think it's a fascinating thing because it allows people to actually look at things, right? That maybe they would just keep pushing off, and why do we women push it off? But
Yeah, what I think part of it, women are actually very engaged and concerned and it's their health is actually top of mind and we know that women really want to know what's going on in their bodies,
Mhm.
but in this day and age, women are busy. We're a big part of family units, workforce, there's a lot of content and things that are, making a woman's life quite full. And so getting that information, we really have to lower the barriers as much as we can for women to be able to get the information that they actually want. And today there are just quite a few barriers to overcome. Not just the fact that you have to sort of take time off from work or wherever you are to drive in and sit and wait and go in and get a
Yeah.
blood draw, wait for the results, the costs that are associated with this, but frankly, also when you get into the doctor, we often hear women feeling a little bit overlooked and perhaps feeling that they need to almost convince the doctor that they are feeling a certain way. And this, I think one of the things that we hear oftentimes that women are excited about with the Q-pad, when we asked them what they were doing while they were using the Q-pad, well, they were picking up the kids, they were going to work, they were doing groceries. But on top of that, it's this feeling of um being empowered and being able to take control of your own health. Not that it replaces the doctor, because that's certainly not
No.
the purpose of the platform, but it becomes a tool that a woman can use in between doctor's visits to stay informed, to know, the doctor tells you you have high cholesterol, go, exercise 30 minutes a day, don't eat this, but eat that. And I'll see you next year, or I'll see you in 6 months. And I think for a lot of women, the idea of being able to track and understand what's going on more regularly without the inconvenience of going in, it is very empowering and almost motivating even to be able to
Mhm.
stay on top of your health and make the better life choice that enables you to stay healthy.
Well, and I think you and I have talked about this, but women make 80 to 90% of all the healthcare decisions for their family and for their family
Yes.
system for themselves. But they kind of tend, I think, to put more of their emphasis on, their partners and their children and making sure everybody is well. And then, they kind of get last in the list, even though, like you said, I think they want to know and they really are in tune with what's going on, but they get so overwhelmed, I think, with so many things they're not sure to how to prioritize. So I think the easier that we can
Yes.
make access, availability with information that's, clinically valid, I think that's pretty exciting. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Sarah, tell us a little bit about like some of the clinical things that you might be looking at when you're actually collecting this blood, because it's a pretty easy procedure for them to actually use, the Q pad, right? So, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's quite simple to use. I think part of us obtaining FDA clearance, we actually were able to obtain it as an at-home over-the-counter collection device, which really speaks to the simplicity of it, right? The fact that it is so kind of bulletproof and easy for women to use. And in terms of what we've tested for, the very first thing, of course, that I want to mention is what the FDA clearance also included, which is a
Okay.
biomarker called hemoglobin A1C,
Mhm.
which is, I would say generally a biomarker that has been used for many, many, many years to monitor and understand what's going on with our general health, but specifically also it's used to diagnose diabetes, pre-diabetes,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
if you are living with diabetes, it is actually the biomarker that we use to monitor the condition and also regulate medications. So that's sort of a little bit about hemoglobin A1C in general. And then specifically for
Mhm.
the QPAD, we were able to obtain FDA clearance, which really allows chronic patients that have a need to go in for regular monitoring to actually do that in this very, very convenient way when they have their period. And so that's the first one that we're really excited about, where we hope to really make a difference and have a positive impact on patients' lives. And then on top of that, we've done quite a bit of research, and we've also validated a number of biomarkers in a clear laboratory, and they range from examples would sort of be fertility hormones, hemoglobin, thyroid hormones, vitamins, cholesterol we've published on. But I would say the most exciting one that I'm really, really eager to push forward and be able to offer women in the US, but also abroad, is the opportunity for the QPAD to actually screen for something like cervical cancer, which today, requires invasive procedures. We've done a number of studies that really show that the QPAD is able to actually detect that as well as a clinician, which is really, really exciting and something that we're working hard on making
Mhm.
available, hopefully as soon as possible.
Yes, because I think cervical cancer, it's one of those cancers that we don't really have a very good testing for unless someone's really religious about going to their physician and really following through in the ways that they should be. I'll have a lot of moms, even, postpartum wise. And I said, oh, hey, did you go in, postpartum? And sometimes if they've seen midwives or they got busy or they even missed their 6 week checkup or they didn't go back in. And I recently, I was about a year ago, had a mom who, didn't even know she had anything going on. She hadn't really gone back in for a checkup. And sure enough, ended up with cervical cancer and had no idea. And I think these are the things that we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we prevent? How do we get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
Preventable diseases. And I think that's the
Yep.
thing that struck me with the QPAD. I was like, wow, it's such, I mean, being over the counter, I mean, I thought it was priced pretty reasonably for women to be able to learn a whole lot about their health.
Yep. Oh yeah. We actually with the hemoglobin A1C, which is available now on Amazon and also on our website, we are actually matching the average copay in the United States, and the idea being that it has to be accessible. I mean, I think the moment we start to innovate in healthcare and we're trying to come up with solution that can be helpful for women in this case, it really doesn't matter if we are innovating on solutions that are not accessible and affordable, right? So I think that's something that we've really had top of mind since really the inception of the company. And the idea is that we can, really sort of say, okay, what you would pay to go in to get, in this case, a blood draw, in cervical cancer, it's of course not a blood draw, it's something else. But in this particular case with
Right.
hemoglobin A1C, it's a blood draw. What you would do as a copay there, we can match, and that way it be accessible and comparable. And then also we are FSA, HSA approved as well. So
Mhm.
that's the way that women can really take advantage and hopefully get access to this particular way of screening for their health. So absolutely, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a whole thing too, right? Like you said, accessible, affordable, easy to get. I mean,
Yeah,
you're talking about being on Amazon and can be delivered to your door. I think that's huge for people. People want that convenience. And sometimes I
yeah.
know, you're a physician, so you know how it is, trying to actually get into a physician sometimes. I mean, I have patients sometimes who are waiting 3 months to actually see a physician.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned, women who just delivered, had a baby and they missed their checkups and they, end up not coming in. And it is so busy, especially in that phase of life. And it is unfortunate that we end up missing some patients that really could benefit from getting a screening done because of inconvenience, and I think it's really about how do we innovate, how do we improve women's health, not only to discover things that we don't even know about women's bodies right now, which I think frankly is a big part of Qvin as well. We are still at a point where we don't know um, a lot of information that we know menstrual blood has. We don't know yet what that could lead to.
So, uh, so Sarah, one of the things that we're looking at here now in the U.S. is that people sometimes aren't even able to get in to see their physician for 3 months, or they don't. It's like unless they have some pressing emergency, they can't even get back in. So this is. I think technology like you're talking about and these types of biomarkers that people can look at, they're impressive for us because they allow people to actually have information during a time frame maybe they're waiting and stressing.
Absolutely, and part of it is also that doctors are busy and the wait times to see a doctor can be very long. And then you add on top that, again, women are busy. And you mentioned, women who've just had a baby and in this particular phase, they miss checkups, they miss, going in. And
Mhm,
we end up losing patients that really could benefit from having that screening done. So it's really about how do we capture those? How do we make it so easy that women can get that information and can get health care? I think that's really where this particular solution is. It has its strength, right? Because women are bleeding regardless, and they are actually collecting menstrual blood in some format, but they're throwing it away instead of utilizing it. And I think that's where the opportunity is here to say, okay, since this is happening anyways, why not make use of it? And really understand what's going on in our bodies so that we can avoid getting, cervical cancer and other conditions that are entirely preventable. And really, frankly, no woman today should die of cervical cancer. We know we can prevent it if it's caught early, and
mhm,
we have the tools to do so. What we are missing is making it easy and accessible for patients to get that screening, right? So that's really where I think this tool shines, and I hope
mhm,
where it will have an impact. Partly on the accessibility side, but also, one thing is how do we make screenings that are sort of that we know are useful today? How do we make them more convenient? The other thing is how do we really close the gender data gap that exists in women's health? Because
mhm,
there's a lot of information that we still don't know
mhm,
about female biology, right? And even within, looking at menstrual blood and the opportunity we're looking at, we're really just scratching the surface here of what's
mhm,
possible. And we've yet to still do the research to understand some of these unique biomarkers that we know are also present in menstrual blood, how they relate to specific indications. And so, part of it is also to really begin to even make new diagnoses available, new specific treatments available for female
mhm.
biology that really historically we haven't had the focus on, right? Unfortunately.
Well, I know some of the things that I looked at too with Quinn is basically like even inflammation markers. And when you were talking about thyroid health, perimenopause, to menopause standpoints, like when people are sort of I think those things, if there's clinical validation for those things that might be coming down the pipe for people, that would be so helpful as well. You mentioned fertility issues already and HPV, et cetera. But I think those things are powerful as well because a lot of times a woman, especially like when she's kind of perimenopause, she doesn't maybe feel so well, and to kind of have
Yeah,
a little more data available for women spend 40% of their lifetime perimenopause, menopause, right? And so if there was data to help us understand how that process is happening. And you hear people say, oh, well, oh, that doesn't happen until you're 48 or to 52. And you're realizing, no, these things are happening way before that. And women are
yeah,
just living with it and not feeling very well. So I think being able to actually collect, like you just said, blood is one of the biggest things that people are collecting. And I think that's the beauty of the QPAD too, is that it's easy. So maybe just explain too, like when you do get it, like how does it go? How is it processed? How do they find the information, et cetera?
absolutely. Yeah, so you can buy the Cupid, as I mentioned, on Amazon or get it on our website at Qvin.com. When you order a Cupid kit, it comes to your home, the address that you've inputted, right? So it comes to your house. You use it, of course, when you have your period. I would say women typically wear it for 2 to 4 hours.
Mhm,
And we recommend using it on the day of your heaviest flow. For most women, that's the second day of their period. But again, it's actually quite variable. Some women, it is the first, some women, it's the third. We even have women
mhm,
who use it on the fourth day of their period. But really, when you open the kit and you see the Q pad, it looks, feels, and is used like any other menstrual pad. It's built on organic cotton and is
mhm,
worn like any other pad. On the very front of the Q pad, you'll find that there is an oval printed, and this is a way to visually show you that once this area is covered, you've collected enough so that we can definitely
mhm,
run testing on it. When you're
mhm,
done, you pull this little tab that removes a small collection device. You throw away the pad like you would with any other menstrual pad, but that small collection device is placed in a small container that comes with the kit and it's pre-stamped to a clinical laboratory. So you place the little collection device in that container, and then you throw it in a mailbox, and we will receive it in the laboratory, and it'll be processed, and you'll receive your results about a week later on a mobile app that comes with the kit as well. So in that way, it's a fairly simple process to use the QPad.
And so is this information that they get on the mobile app, then can they share it with their physician, or how does all of that work as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So the mobile app, you can, it has the instructions, of course, but there's also instructions that comes with the kit that are printed. But the app has all the instructions, and you register the QPAD using that app as well. When you get your results, you can sort of see over time how the biomarkers are changing over time. And basically with the click of a button, you can share these results with your doctor. And so the
Mm,
app has a very user friendly way of visualizing and explaining what these biomarkers mean, and if they go up and down, what are the
mhm,
actionable things that can be done. But then when you choose to share it with your doctor, it will actually spit out a traditional laboratory report that clinicians are used to looking at, and that can then be shared with the doctor if you wish to do so.
mm. So, does the so do they upload that to the doctor, or do they share that information on the platform? Is the doctor part of that platform?
So there is a doctor on before any result is released, a doctor is looking through the results. So that's sort
Mhm.
of within the clinical laboratory world, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of how you share it with your doctor, it's essentially the laboratory report that comes from the testing in the clinical lab. That
Mhm.
report is then PDF'd, and it is then you can then basically email it to your doctor. So it doesn't require the doctor to be on the platform. They don't have to sort of connect with
Mhm.
your profile or anything like that. It's really, if you wish to share it, you click a button, it spits out a PDF of the laboratory report, and you can
Mhm.
then email it, forward it to the doctor.
Mhm. So, Dr. Sarah, how have you, with people who have been using it currently, what has the feedback been, or what has some of the talk been behind, oh, the usage of it and some of their feelings of like, did they feel relieved to know some of this information? Like, share with us a little bit about that because I think that's a great part for people to understand.
I think that a big part of the feedback, it really speaks to the convenience that I don't have to take time off from school or work or out of my day to day. Really, I'm having my period. This gives me an opportunity to use it. So I think that's a big part of it. We also, hear from women that there's something very empowering about knowing where my levels are even before I show up to the doctor's office, and
Mhm,
it takes away some anxiety that can be associated with these regular checkups, especially for patients that are living with diabetes and they have to, come in pretty regularly, and they're monitoring this particular biomarker that really kind of shows us if they are on track with their diet and on track with their medication and these sorts of things. And it can be sometimes linked with a little bit of anxiety to not know before you go
mhm,
in,
mhm,
where is my level at? Am I on track? And so you're waiting, months to go in, but you really don't know in those times in between what is the status of what's going on here. And I think that's really kind of where a lot of relief comes in, is that, I've done this every month. I know exactly where I am. And by the time I show up to the doctor's office, there are really no surprises. And that way I know where my levels are at. And then I think another thing is we've also heard from women that it can be sometimes hard to actually get access to data, right? And so,
mhm.
in particular, I remember one of our a patient who used the QPAD, who were, trying to conceive, and they were told that, they had to wait for a certain, actually for a year, and they wanted to monitor this particular biomarker because they knew it had a big impact on her particular fertility, but they weren't getting access, and it was hard to get that access. And so this was a very easy way for them to actually take a little bit of control, and be
Yeah.
empowered to do so on their own terms, right?
Mhm. So, Dr. Sarah, like, are people using it that with type 1 and type 2 diabetes? I mean, is that something? Because I think about it in the, just even in the type 1 world, is that, a lot of times, young women who are type 1, they might have all kinds of numbers that are moving all over because they have a lot of hormone changes going on. So, could this be beneficial, for a lot of younger women who maybe have type 1? So that they can do better job of tracking, without just having their regular draws, right? And they could kind of track. I mean, what do you?
Absolutely. So yes, the FDA clearance in particular was specifically for, any woman living with diabetes, which includes type 1 and type 2. In our clinical trials that led to the FDA clearance also included both patients. So yes,
Excellent.
absolutely, that is certainly the idea behind it.
That's pretty exciting, I think, too, because sometimes when they're between their draws, I feel like, it's kind of stressful, especially if, they're doing new things. So many young women, all of a sudden now they're going to college and, they might
Yes,
start dating and their stressor levels go up and their blood sugars change so much. So to be able to actually track something on a more, just a more consistent basis, maybe a little bit, in that in
yeah,
between to see like, oh, what are the things that I could be doing to help, sort of regulate my blood sugar levels, even in a more steady way. So, I mean, that's a pretty amazing tool, I think, when you look at that for women, whether it is type 1 or type 2, but I see it a lot in the type 1, because they have a lot of things they're working through when they're young women, and it can tend to like get
absolutely.
their blood sugar numbers going all over. And so if they can quickly check like, hey, these things might be more stressors for my system where my blood sugars, even though I'm doing everything I would normally do you know what I mean, but
Yeah,
they're all over the place, it's super helpful. So I see that as like such a positive easy way, especially for our type 1 women.
absolutely. I think it reminds me of another woman who, a young woman who, what she was planning this like big road trip, 6, 7, 8 months, driving around the country. And one of the things that she was saying was it's actually really hard because she has to come back for these checkups.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, with the Cupid is that you can bring it and you can mail it from anywhere in the country.
Mhm.
and you can make sure that you are getting checked and that there is some kind of insight, even though you are not, you won't be in that area where your doctor is, right? So I think it gives you flexibility in that way too, as a young woman, that you can, make sure that you are getting checked, even though you are living your life as you should be able to, right?
Mhm. Absolutely, giving them the freedom that they need to do, well, and I think of some of my older women with type 2, they might travel during the winter times from cold months now to warmer areas or whatever, and they get nervous, like, "Oh, but I still have to see my physician," and this just seems like a really easy way to be able to stay in touch with the things without having to try to find another doctor, like, wherever you're going or wherever you're doing things. Sarah, let's just segue because I know when you're a co-founder, you have so many responsibilities every day. How do you keep your resilience? How do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep so passionate?
I think I want to say that as a woman, as a doctor, I was really surprised that so little information had been published on the topic. And so I think part of it is that I've always been very passionate about this preventative care. And I think,
Mhm,
unfortunately, our healthcare is very focused on what I would say is
mhm,
sick care. We sort of, once you're sick, we have really good tools to treat you. But, I think where we really can make a difference and actually um, make people's lives not go to that extent and give them peace of mind is in the much, much, much earlier phase of
mhm,
our journeys, right? And so, been very passionate about preventative care. I think I find it very. It's a privilege to be able to work on something that has meaning and can be so impactful that as I believe this platform will be, from a global perspective, not just in the country, but I think very much outside the country where there is no doctor. This is an incredible opportunity, really, that we can
mhm.
improve healthcare really all over
The
the
world.
in many different countries, right? And that's
Mhm,
incredibly motivating. And then you add on top the fact that it is so new, and that's also motivating. That we start out and we didn't really know anything about what menstrual blood was, and so to be able to really dedicate so much time in understanding that and I would say continuing to do so because again we are just scratching the surface is also very exciting and motivating, and then I am incredibly lucky that to work with people that share that kind of passion for women's health and for
mhm,
spending our time on something that is impactful. And it's an incredible group of people that are working behind the scenes very hard to make this possible. And I think just the effort that was put into obtaining FDA clearance, frankly, not a lot of companies even
mhm,
attempt to go through that. And
mhm,
and there are a lot of solutions and healthcare
mhm,
products out there actually that have not gone through such a process. And I think it really speaks to the kinds of people that are working behind the scenes, that they are as resilient, they are motivated, and they're very dedicated to the cause. One of the very first studies we did was actually in rural Zimbabwe, and we were screening for cervical cancer. And I think just to see, where perhaps a platform like the QPAD could be a convenience,
mhm,
question in some parts of the world, in some, areas, certainly also in the US. In other areas of the US and certainly outside of the US, it's not a nice to have, it's actually a need. There are no hands
mhm,
to conduct
mhm.
these screenings, and women are dying of conditions that really they shouldn't have to, right? And so, it just there's a lot of, it makes it very easy to get up in the morning, I would say, to and continue, what has been already a long but very fascinating journey.
Well, I think you just brought it up, but this whole global idea that this is a global product that basically can change healthcare. I mean, because we're fortunate in the US that we have such good healthcare, really, and we have ways in which to screen people, and we're screening people way earlier than's happening probably in a lot of places all over the world. And so, and
Absolutely.
as you just said before, with just even cervical cancer alone, I mean, if there's the possibility that you can have something as useful and as the utility, as you say, to be able to get it. And I think it has to change our mindset a little bit because, think of it, we've always thought as blood as like, oh, yeah, you just throw that away. And oh, maybe that's like disgusting and not worth anything. Do you know what I mean? And I think, when I started learning about Qvin, I was like, isn't it interesting that, this thing that we've been throwing away all these years actually might have a usefulness to actually prevent diseases? Like, that's like a fascinating sort of step, and especially when you think about it, we just take it for granted, I think, in the US because and a lot of, Europe as well, probably because we have so much accessibility to so many things, right? But suddenly, when you're looking all around the world and you're saying, "Hey, there's places that we just don't have the ability," like you said, physicians and people on the ground, boots on the ground of people to collect any kind of blood draws or whatever. And then we can be changing women's health care, through menstrual periods. I mean, that's incredible.
It is, and you brought up the word disgusting, and I think it's interesting because it's interesting that something that has been so overlooked and has been regarded as a waste product, as a stigma, as a taboo, as something
Mhm.
disgusted. I would even go to the extent to say, in some regions of the world, something almost evil. Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that actually holds potentially the key to unlocking it really the opportunity for good healthcare in many parts of the world. And I think that's part of why this is so exciting is also to be able to change that conversation from how we look at menstrual blood, how we talk about it, how our perceptions around it is to really shifting it to something that, this is actually a useful tool and an opportunity for women to know what's going on in their bodies. And I actually, in my mind, I think menstrual blood is the biggest and most overlooked opportunity in women's health. There's so much information in menstrual blood, and for decades since the beginning of time, we've just been throwing it away. But it actually holds the key to like really understanding our healthcare and certainly to get access to screening that are very hard to do or invasive or expensive. But women can do it on their own. Their bodies are sort of doing it already, right? We just need to take advantage of it. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I think that's I think what blew me away the most because think of it, we know we don't know enough about women's healthcare. We know we don't have enough data and research and support in like, okay, what are the things that we need to learn about, right? And so if you're thinking about it, something as easy as menstrual blood that people have, once a month, that we could be studying and understanding more and more of what affects women and how could we utilize something like that to give us statistics and data and information. I think it changes, right, our thought process. And like you said, changing it from something that was not useful to, oh my gosh, could this open the door to more quality healthcare for women all over the world? That's what we're about. And something easy, right, to be able to collect and to get and to start to understand. And I think, like I said, that's why when I saw Quinn, I was like, wow, because I think, when you start thinking about how we're sort of behind with women's healthcare and behind in our research data, like we're like, how can we catch up and catch up faster? And,
yes.
maybe not be so invasive or maybe not, and be able to understand and do data. So I know like, the FDA cleared you on diabetes. What are you looking at next with Quinn, like as your next clearance or your next component?
We're looking at a number of different essays, and I would say the one that we are really, really excited about is where we think this platform could have a major impact in particular is the cervical cancer space. And really, instead of women having to go in, get undressed, get on the table, have a speculum exam, collect cells from the cervix, they can do that non-invasively, privately, just by using a modified menstrual pad. And we think that that in particular will be a massive impact in the US, but really also outside of the US. So that's one of the things that we are working on.
Mm. You mentioned the thyroid before. Will you talk a little bit about that as well, just so people know? I think sometimes, Dr. Sarah, when This is why I love having people on the show because I think women want to know who's working on this. Like, who's going to actually look at something and try to make a change for us. So I think I'm just looking at it from an encouragement standpoint of like what might be coming. You're working on the cervical cancer component next, but let's look at some of the other maybe complexities, whether it's thyroid or inflammation or fertility, et
Yeah. Oh,
cetera.
yeah.
Talk about a few of those as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already validated a number of fertility hormones, thyroid hormone, and actually you mentioned inflammation, so inflammation biomarkers as well. And they're validated in a clinical laboratory. And so for those, it's really about figuring out what are the right paths to actually go to market with the existing regulatory framework. And that framework actually changed quite recently, not even 6 months ago. The clear laboratory regulations shifted, and it's still a little bit unknown with the current situation and with the government and how the FDA will be regulated moving forward and how that affects clinical laboratories, how that's gonna play out. And so for now, with these particular ones, we are actually sort of a little bit in a waiting phase in understanding what the next steps are gonna be. But the
Yeah.
goal is certainly to make them available, and we do have the validation data that is required from a clinical laboratory standpoint to be able to look at those. So those are, yeah, and I would say, for the fertility hormones, the thyroid hormone, the inflammation biomarkers, a lot of those also come, we've tested more than 1,000 women at this point using the QPAD. We've interviewed well over 1,000 as well. And so when we ask women, what is it that you would like to know about your body, right? Right. What is it that would give you peace of mind to be able to monitor and track? And oftentimes, the answer is I would like to know my fertility window. We know that this clock is ticking and it's individual, how fast or how slow. And that's also very much tied to perimenopause, right? The
Mhm,
same types of biomarkers are applicable for that stage of life too. And so
mhm,
these are just some of the biomarkers that have come up again and again that women are eager really to get access to, and that may also be harder to get access to through a clinician,
mhm,
especially when it comes to some of the fertility and the perimenopause
mhm.
biomarkers.
Yes, I see that a lot just in our practices every day. A woman feels some changes happening, whether it's to her musculoskeletal system with joints, aches, and pains, etc. That's why the thyroid, the inflammatory markers, just looking at that perimenopause state, that can be a really stressful time for women. And to be able to have more information, I think, more easily present, it's pretty powerful because I think they get upset, but they don't know who to talk to, and sometimes they're dismissed.
Exactly, exactly. So that is part of, I think why these biomarkers are coming up again and again, and why the
Yeah.
platform can really be a helpful tool, right? Because I think the feeling of being dismissed when you have a health concern is not good, and a lot of women don't deserve that either, right? So how can we help them get information and get some insights
Mhm,
um, that are currently unfortunately not easy to get by?
mhm. So, if you're allowed to say, Dr. Sarah, this next year, and like, what are you working on? What are you hoping to accomplish? Where is all of this moving and going? As you said, you're on Amazon. People can get it there. What other things do you want to share with everybody?
I think for us this year is really about expanding some of the utility that the QPAD holds with
Mhm,
we have these assays that are, fully validated. It's about figuring out how do we bring them to market. That's one side of it. And then the other side of it is to continue to really understand what else we can use menstrual blood for. We
mhm.
know that there's a little bit less than 400 unique proteins in menstrual blood, and really
Wow.
continuing to do the work to understand how those relate to our reproductive organs and to our overall health. And so, with that, continuing clinical trials, we work very closely. And frankly, for a lot of the work that we've done, including some of the validation work that we've done on these different biomarkers, we work very closely with Stanford University Hospital. And so, some of that research, we are hoping to continue and really expand on. to really unlock what the full potential of menstrual blood really is.
And so say that again. How many proteins?
A little bit less than 400 unique proteins in menstrual blood.
Yeah, for something that we think we should just throw away, that's pretty impressive.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah. It's about time that we start looking at this. It's, if it's every woman goes through this every month, we should know what it is and how it relates to our healthcare, including the opportunities that it holds, right? So
Mhm.
it's unfortunately, it's we're still early in the journey, but I think over the next couple of years we'll learn a lot more, and I'm very excited. I think the indications are certainly there, and the question of whether menstrual blood is a waste product certainly has been answered. It is not, right? That is
Yeah.
definitely we can definitely put a lid on that. That there is certainly utility here, and the question is just, how big of an impact will it have?
So I want everybody to realize like this has been a long journey for Dr. Sarah already. And so I want you to give encouragement to people out there who might have thoughts like you do, like, oh, the light bulb goes on and you think, oh, should this be something we even think about? So please encourage people because part of this podcast is to help women understand like, okay, you're an entrepreneur, but you're also a clinician, you're a physician, you see things and you say, oh, I need to find a solution because it's not enough for us to just keep talking about all these problems in women's healthcare. It's time for all of us as women who work in women's healthcare to actually say, okay, how are we coming up with solutions to the problems that we already know exist? And I mean, I think, when I look at Qvin, when I look at the QPAT, I'm like, okay, we're actually looking at, hey, there might be a way to find solutions to this. So I want you to give people the push that, if you're a clinician and you're listening, or you're a, person who has thoughts about, hey, there's this problem. What do I have this idea of a solution? Because I think it would have been easy for you 10 years ago to be like, oh, this is just too much work. I can just be a physician and, you know what I mean, live a good life. And yet you said, no, like the light bulb went on. And I think I want to choose something different because I know there's a problem that really needs to be solved. So, if there are people out there that need that encouragement, will you tell them like how that works for you just one more time? Like, hey, you got to listen to
Yeah,
the voice in your head, right?
absolutely. I believe that as human beings, we're all able and capable to have good ideas, and what really sort of separates us a little bit, perhaps, is, are you gonna follow those ideas? And I think, it's almost a question of what is the future we want to live in? What is it that we want for our own lives and the generations that comes after us? And do we want to live in a world that somebody else sort of designs the product and we go and we buy and or do we actually want to be a part of creating that future? And I
Mhm.
think to get on that journey of let's be active in building that future, and let's pursue these ideas that we have when we believe in them. I think is very important. It's not easy, so I'm not gonna sit here and say it's just something that you do, but I think if you're sitting there with something and I would almost say for me, it's even less about the solution. It's actually about finding out what are we really passionate about? What is it that really makes me um passionate about a specific topic? And once you know what that is, then I think we can all come up with good ideas to follow that. I would say it's been a very long journey. It's been a hard journey, a lot of challenges along the way, but it's also been very rewarding and very fun. And I would certainly encourage everyone to if they're sitting there with a good idea for something that they've seen be an issue, to take that leap of faith and try to do something about it. Reach out to people who've done it, people that are in their networks or not. I mean, I do get emails quite often also from people who I don't know at all, but who are asking, how did you get started, or where would do you have any connections into the research world or anything like that. And I think, a lot of people are willing to pay it forward and help. I myself had a lot of people also that were willing to pay it forward for me, and it continues to do so. So, never be afraid of asking a question. And I think you'll be surprised that actually when you're working on something that matters, and a lot of people are willing to help.
You talk a little bit about your team then too, Sarah, because you just brought up that whole piece of it, and I want people to understand like this happens in a collaborative ways, right? Like you and I are not an island. We're like working together when we're trying to solve bigger puzzle pieces, I think, in women's health. And so like not being afraid, just like you said, that there are women who reach out to you and then you're willing to pay it forward. I know a lot of women who are willing to mentor and pay it forward for the very reason of that, right? Because they're like, hey, we don't make the next generation of women coming unless we're willing to do that, right? So, talk about your team and maybe some of the things that you should look for when you're trying to collective team of people to like actually do the next thing.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is actually realizing what you are not maybe so good at, because we can't be good at everything, right? And so, I think being completely aware of, here's my strength, here's my weakness, and how can I then find people that match and can sort of help on where I don't have the knowledge or the expertise. And that's sort of where team building comes in. And I'm not
Mhm.
even just talking about within the Qvin family, but really also outside of that. We can't
Yeah.
we can't do it alone. We need to partner with institutions. We need investors to support the cause. We need multiple functions to come together to be able to realize something like this. And certainly, even looking ahead, realizing some of the, in still big questions that we have around the utility, and how it could be further impactful for other areas of women's health. It has to be a collaboration. And so being willing to reach out and not unafraid to do so, I think is a very big part of
Mhm.
making an impact. No road was built by one person, right? And that's really also why when you talk about how do you keep going, it's really also about the people, right? um, you have a team and you have collaborators, and it becomes a joint project. And I think that partly that motivates as well. Um, and so, when you look for teammates, I
Mhm.
think one thing is, of course, finding people who have the expertise that you need, help with, or that needs to be filled. But I think also looking for people that have what we call grit, because
Mhm.
it is a journey that has a lot of ups and downs, and you need a certain type of person to be willing to stand with you through those ups and downs. I think that's really where it can be hard sometimes to figure out what is the right team for this particular journey. And of course, it's very different from company to company, but I do think like the secret sauce here is people who really are so passionate, and that they have that true grit to continue even when it's really, really hard.
I love that, the secret sauce. Yeah, the grit. I definitely say that. So,
Yeah.
Sarah, I love one thing you said is I'm going to bring it up again because I think it's great. You said be active in designing the future we want. And I really think that's where we sit right now in women's healthcare, don't you? Like, it's easy to complain. I was talking to some other founders. And it was just so interesting because, it's easy to be like, oh, here's all these problems, here's all these, and oh, here's all these barriers. And really just sitting back down with yourself. Like when I talk to so many founders, we always go back to like, okay, the why of why did you start this? Why did you like what brought you here? Right. Was that, hey, the future that we want, if we don't actually actively do that, we're never going to get to where we want to go. And so I think that's the beauty of this. And I love the way you said it, be active in designing the future we want. It's that's a powerful statement. And I think that's I think when you go back to like accessibility for women, affordable, the opportunity to learn something about who they are and their physical self, and absolutely possible to prevent something because they were willing to use this utility that we otherwise got rid of every month. I think it's so, it's empowering. And I think this is where we want to go, right? So that we just keep learning and knowing. And then we have so many more opportunities for women to have such a higher quality of life. And I thank you for your work at Qvin and what you're doing. It's really powerful work. I think when we think outside, that realm of like, oh, being trapped in old thoughts or old stories or old narratives about something like menstrual blood, right? Now we can look
Yeah.
and say, hey, it has a utility that might change women's healthcare forever.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. And I think, being active in the future that we want is it really, it can be as simple as participate in a clinical trial. Make sure that women female biology is represented in those studies, right? Because not being active in designing the future we want has brought us to a place where we are decades behind when it comes to women's health, right? So we have to get active, and
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be build your own
Right?
company necessarily, right? Not at all. It could be as simple as, yeah, participate in a local study that, includes
Mhm.
women, and make sure that women are represented in the data that leads to the diagnoses, that leads to the treatments. It's very, very important, and
Yeah.
we are very much behind. So I think it's a good message to get across.
Well, Dr. Sarah, thank you so much for being with me today. And I just look forward to following Qvin and following your journey. And as more things come along, I'm sure I'm going to have you back on the show to talk about all the next steps of Qvin. But I thank you for
Yes.
your time today. It's been wonderful and it's been a pleasure to meet you. And I'm just so thankful for all the work you all are doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for even wanting to talk about menstrual blood. I really appreciate it because, again, the first step is really also about creating awareness, right? Women don't even know they have this
Yeah.
opportunity. So thank you for being part of helping us spread that awareness and getting that information out to women. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I love all the femtech work that's going on right now. And I think these are the things that are
Yeah.
powerful to change women's healthcare and then provide the future that we want for women in our country and all over the world. So thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you so much.